autumn season has finally begun, in my mind at least. As soon as September hits, it is officially autumn, and that means it's time to do one of my favourite videos that I do every year, which is an autumn book recommendations video. I've done this video twice before. I did one last year and one the year before, so I am going to not recommend any of the books that I referenced in those videos, but if you want to go back and watch them, they are full of even more autumn book recommendations. Things like Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, or Poison Study by Maria V. Snyder, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, just so many of my favourite autumn books. But I feel like autumn books is just my reading taste. I love books that are moody and atmospheric and cosy and maybe a little bit eerie. And I just feel like autumn feel books are what I read all year round. So as always, I have so many more books to recommend to you, and that is what we're going to do in this video. So go and grab yourself a comforting warm drink, light a candle, get cozy, and let's talk about autumn books that you should definitely pick up this autumn. The first category of books is cozy cup of tea reads, and by that I mean cozy, heartwarming, happy books that you can read in one sitting because they're quite short and they're just easygoing autumnal reads. The first books that I want to recommend in this category are the Shady Hollow books by Janue Black, and these are perfect for people who love small town, cozy vibes, for people who like books that are about the coziness and the feel and the atmosphere, perhaps a little bit more than the plot line, and also for people who like children's stories. Not that these are children's stories, I think they're definitely adult books, although children could probably enjoy them, but they just have that charming, whimsical, childlike nature to them because all of the characters are talking animals. This is a series of murder mystery novels in which a fox named Vera, who is also a reporter and works for the local newspaper, ends up uncovering a murder in their sleepy, cozy town of Shady Hollow where nothing bad ever happens, and she ends up becoming a detective of the story. We have cozy coffee shops, bookshops, cider farms, apple cider farms, harvest festivals. It's just all there with the autumnal feel. Definitely pick those up if you love a cozy murder mystery and just want those autumnal cozy feels. The next book is The City Baker's Guide to Country Living by Louise Miller, and you should read this if you have the desire to rewatch Gilmore Girls every year. I mean, it literally says on the cover that this is for fans of Gilmore Girls. It says, super cozy, okay, it's Gilmore Girls. It's sort of like if Suki from Gilmore Girls had her own novel. The main character is a pastry chef, and she has moved from her big city chefing job to go and stay with her friend in a small cozy town, and as she is there she ends up becoming hired as the chef for the local inn. However, the innkeeper has a little bit of an ulterior motive for why she is getting her involved. There's romance, yummy food, an apple pie baking competition, small town rivalries. It's brilliant. And then finally, within the cozy cup of tea reads category, we have 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. This is perfect for people who love You've Got Mail, or the kind of storyline of people writing letters to each other and learning about each other through the written word. This is a real life collection of letters between an American woman who is trying to source these rare books for her collection and an English bookseller who works for a rare bookshop. And it's just such a charming, funny, witty series of interactions between these two people who don't know each other, would probably have no interaction with each other if they met in real life. But because of their shared love of books, they end up connecting. If you love books about books, you should read this one. The next category of books is atmospheric fantasy books to read by candlelight. These are the kind of fantasy books that have such a cozy atmosphere that you just want to read in the dark, with a hot cup of hot chocolate, and they just transport you to another world. The first book I want to talk about is Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross. This is the perfect book for people who like romantic fantasy, rivalry in their fantasy, and also the kind of fantasy that is smoky chimneys and cozy towns and magic and old houses and all of that kind of feel. In this world, there are wardens who have the task of going round to all of the people in the town or village throughout the month and recording their nightmares, because once a month somebody in that town or village's nightmares will come true and the warden has to defeat them. We follow a warden's daughter who is being trained up by her father to take on this role when she gets older, and things go a little bit awry. And Rebecca Ross's writing is so lush and dreamlike, and it really fits that mood of dreams and nightmares and other worlds. We then have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is for people who love fairy stories, but not fairy stories, because this is definitely about the dark side of fairy lore rather than the cutesy side of fairy lore. I think this is also perfect for people who love the idea of dark academia, but feel like dark academia books are a bit too creepy and scary and disturbing for them. Basically me. This book follows the diary entries of an academic named Emily Wilde, and her field of research is fairies, and in this version of our world, fairies are commonly believed to be real, and Emily Wilde is a professor at Oxford or Cambridge, and she is on this quest to write the world's first encyclopedia of fairies. And so at the beginning of this story, we follow her to this remote, cold town where she is searching for that final fairy. There is brilliant banter and romance and friendship and a dog and cozy small town again, but all mixed in with this fairy tale like story, but a slightly dark fairy tale. It definitely has that curl up under a blanket on a cold day kind of feel. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is for you if you wish you could live in a magical library. I mean, who doesn't wish that? We follow a girl who has grown up in a library, and her job and what she's been raised to do is to protect the books in the library, because in this world the books are grimoires, so they are kind of alive, and they have to chain these books behind these metal bars and metal chains because they have the ability to turn into these grotesque and horrible monsters. When one of the most dangerous books in the library is attempted to be stolen, our main character ends up on a quest to discover what is really going on. And it's also for, I should have said this right at the beginning, this is for fans of Howl's Moving Castle, because it really has that similar feel to it. Touch of Power by Maria V. Snyder. This is for people who love classic fantasy, so fantasy with healers and dungeons and adventures and quests and horse riding and sword fighting and that kind of fantasy. I feel like Maria V. Snyder does that sort of fantasy really well. She takes a very classic feel and a classic world and makes you want to follow the characters within it. I haven't read this book for a long time, but it follows Avery, who is a healer, but in this world healers are kind of known as the villains because there was this big outbreak of a virus or some kind of disease that spread around to people, and the healers are blamed for kind of unleashing it. They're believed to be the ones that caused the disease to spread. And so we follow this last healer in the world as she tries to survive and also gets wrapped up in some bigger schemes. And the final category of books I want to talk about are eerie classics to read on a misty day. These are the kind of classics to curl up with. They're a little bit eerie, a little bit creepy, a little bit gothic, but not horror. The first one is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is for people who actually do like dark academia novels. I feel like this is the ultimate original dark academia novel. Don't quote me on that, I'm sure there's one that came out before this that everyone will think of, but to me at least this feels like the ultimate dark academia novel. If you have never read this book and when you hear Frankenstein you just think of the green monster with a bolt in his head, I definitely feel like you should read this book because it is so much more than that. It is so much more than just a monster story. We follow Dr. Frankenstein throughout his childhood and adolescence and the lead up into him creating this monster and the aftermath of creating this creature and what it does to him, psychologically and physically, and how he deals with that. It's dark, it's definitely a bit creepy and unsettling, but it's just so interesting and gripping at the same time. Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. This is for people who like an atmospheric story based in a real place, but with just that slight unnerving edge of creepiness. It's not full on creepy, but it just has that slight unnerving, unsettling feel to it. As with many of Daphne du Maurier's other books, this is set in Cornwall and we follow a girl whose parents have died and she goes to live with her aunt and uncle who run the Jamaica Inn. And the Jamaica Inn is a real place, it still exists. People still go and eat there and sleep there and stay there. It's still an inn. To me, that makes this book even better because it is a real place that exists and you can visit it. It's not this made up fictional inn. We follow a cast of some dark and twisted characters and it's just a great book. It's also one of Daphne du Maurier's books told from a female perspective. I believe a lot of her books are told from a male perspective, but this is another one like Rebecca that is told from a woman's perspective. And last but certainly not least, I could not do this video without recommending my new favourite book that I have read in the last year and potentially my favourite book of all time, even though I've only read it once. And that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is for people who love an epic story, who like slow stories that take time to develop and unravel. It's definitely for fans of slow stories. It's kind of a haunted house story without the jump scares and the horror. It's such an absorbing and immersive and gripping read. I was up till midnight reading this book when I was reading it, and I was so surprised by how gripping and easy it was to read. So those are all of the books that I have already read, but I also wanted to recommend some new releases in this part of the video. There are so many good books coming out this autumn, and if you are looking for new books to add to your pile, new books to add to your to be read list, then here are some that I'm personally really excited for that are coming out over the next couple of months that might pique your interest. The first book is actually already out. It's just come out on the 31st of August, and that is The Turnglass by Gareth Rubin. This just sounds like such an interesting book. It's a mystery novel, but in 2 parts. So if you hold the book this way, it's one story, and then when you flip the book round, it's another. That half of the book is another story, but they kind of interlock with each other. The first half of the story is set in 1880s England, and it follows a doctor who is called to go and treat his cousin, and his cousin lives in this house on this remote island. I believe this is the only house on the whole island. They're the only inhabitants, and he believes that he has been poisoned by another relative who has been declared insane, and she lives in this glass-walled apartment within the house. The other side of the story is set in 1930s America, and this is a journal. In this journal, the son of the woman who is in this glass apartment is trying to find out what happened to her, but the only way he can find out what happened to her is to read this novel, which is about this doctor who goes to treat this woman in a glass house. It sounds really, really creepy and weird and mysterious, and it sounds so good. The next book is The Golden Spoon, which comes out on the 14th of September, and I've heard this one pitched as a murder mystery / The Great British Bake Off, which sounds weird, but it could be really good. So there's this baking competition, and we have these contestants who go to compete in this baking competition to win the golden spoon, but they are all invited to this manor house, and things seem to be a little bit creepy and off in this manor house. So they're doing the competition by day, but then by night there seems to be some weird things going on and a little bit of a mystery, and I imagine a murder. I'm also really excited for A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, which is a young adult fantasy novel, I want to say, but it's also being pitched as a dark academia novel. We follow this young woman who has always believed in fairy tales, and she's always found solace in this book written about a fairy king and a mortal girl and their love story. She is studying architecture at university, and this project comes up to work on the house of the author of this book, and so she feels like this is her destiny, this is her dream come true to do this. So she volunteers and ends up going to this house to do this architecture project for this author. While she's there, there's this literature student who is also there doing some kind of project or study, and he is out to prove that this author is an absolute fraud. And I guess it's sort of about these two academic rivals in this house, and I'm sure some slightly strange, mysterious things are going to happen, but it sounds so much fun. Next we have Veil by Tess Bentley, and this one is coming out on the 16th of October, and this is a historical fiction novel. We follow a 36-year-old woman who is in an abusive relationship, I think in an abusive marriage, and she is wanting to escape this relationship. I'm not really sure how, but she ends up being transported back to Victorian England to her ancestors, and she is told that she has been brought back because of a curse. She is part of this cursed ancestry, and she is now 18 again. And finally we have The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young, and this comes out on the 19th of October. Again, this is set in a small town in America. We follow this family who are famous for this flower farm that they grow, but they're also a cursed family. We follow June Farrow of this family, and her mother has disappeared, and she is trying to follow these clues to find out where her mother disappeared to and what happened. It sounds like a mystery novel with a bit of magic, a little bit of fantasy, that small town feel, and a bit mysterious. So I feel like there's a common thread between all of these books. So those are all of the books that I have for this video. But as I said, if you want even more autumnal book recommendations, then do check out my last year's video and also the video from the year before, where there are plenty more book recommendations as well. Let me know if you have read any of these books, if you're planning to read any of these books, and also let me know which books you're most excited to read this autumn. I'd love to hear your recommendations as well. I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy the beginning of the autumn season. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with another video.